how I lost fat fast, specifically a total of 11 pounds in just a matter of 4 weeks or 28 days. What is going on, YouTube? Welcome to the video. If you're new here, welcome. If you're a returning subscriber, welcome back. And in today's video, I'm going to be completely breaking down how I lost fat fast, specifically a total of 11 pounds in just a matter of 4 weeks or 28 days. And first off, just to admit, yes, I know the title and everything is a bit clickbaity, but I am a personal trainer and I am first and foremost focused on getting you sustainable results. So I'm going to be breaking down every single thing in this video, some of the more nuanced stuff in terms of what you can actually take away from this. If this is something you should consider, what most people get wrong about taking aggressive, fast fat loss approaches. But most importantly, I'm going to be educating you through everything in terms of the journey itself, my thought process through the entire journey, what I have learned through years of failing and succeeding at dieting, and also how you can take all of this knowledge so that you can apply this to your own life in order to find sustainable results, regardless of whether you choose a fast or a slow fat loss approach. And specifically in this video, I'm going to be covering why I'm taking the aggressive approach, because there seems to be a huge community online that is super against this and tends to demonize this approach. And I used to be in this camp, admittedly, but over the more recent months and years, I've started to realize that different approaches work for different people, and why some people might find it more beneficial to run a more aggressive and fast fat loss approach. And also understanding that if you do it correctly, there can be little to no detrimental effects. Secondly, I'm going to be talking about the journey itself, because admittedly, this is a new approach for me. I've always done it slow and steadily, but this is the first time I'm embarking on this faster and more aggressive approach, just to see how my body responds to it, how I approach the whole thing in terms of diet, exercise, and mindset, and all that good stuff. Thirdly, we're going to break down the amount of progress and results I got at the end of the 28 days. Next, any sort of aha moments or any sort of new things that I've learned about the process and about myself as I was doing it. Next, what I am going to do to maintain these results, because ultimately, there's no point in losing fat fast. There's no point in embarking on some sort of fat loss journey if you're not able to maintain it, because what's the point of getting results if you can't say that I've kept this weight off for the long term? And also, many people lose weight, lose fat all the time, but few are rarely able to maintain those results. And then lastly, we're going to have some final takeaways that I've learned throughout the entire process, kind of putting it all together into one nice package, and then of course some takeaway points that you can learn from this video and apply it into your own life immediately, so that you can get the results that you want in the time frame that you want, and ultimately keep it off, like I said. So without further ado, let's dive in. And firstly, let's discuss, why am I taking this approach? Why did I choose to lose fat fast versus what a lot of people preach, to do it slow and steadily? And one of the biggest reasons is, of course, why you probably clicked on this video. All of us want fast results. All of us want results as quickly as possible. We don't want to drag things out for longer than we need to.
Gotta go fast!
And generally, here's what I found that applies to most people, including my clients. Faster equals more motivation, and also less time that you actually have to spend in that deficit. Because no matter which way you want to spin it, being in a calorie deficit is not fun. Eating fewer calories is not fun.
So this is fun.
However, it is something that you need to do in order to lose fat over the long term. So of course, it's totally understandable to want to get results as fast as possible and to spend the least amount of time you can in a deficit. Next, being in a calorie deficit, like I said, is not fun, and it also applies a lot of mental and physical stress onto your body. Because if you really think about it, being in a calorie deficit is being in an energy deprived or an energy deficit state. So you're literally taking less energy than your body needs on a regular basis, and this can attribute to a lot of stress to your mind and your body. And of course, the longer you try to drag this on, the more stress, the more fatigue you might accumulate in your body. And yes, this still applies regardless of the size of the deficit that you're in.
Besides, size doesn't matter.
So just from a total stress and fatigue point of view, it's much easier to tell yourself that I'm going to put myself in this high stress state for the next 4 to 6 weeks, or however long you want to do your aggressive fat loss phase for, rather than being like, I'm going to stretch this out to 3 to 6 months, which is 12 to 24 weeks. And then, of course, I didn't come across to these concepts myself. A lot of what I have learned that has opened my mind and has really changed the way I view aggressive versus slower fat loss is because of the stuff that I've seen from both Eugene Teo and Paul Carter. Both of these guys are huge advocates for doing shorter, more aggressive deficits versus slower, longer, drawn out ones because of these reasons I mentioned before. And of course, lastly, I wanted to do this just because I wanted to try it, just to see how I would respond and feel both mentally and physically, because like I said, this isn't something that I've done before, so I wanted to try it out, see how it made me feel, and see if this is something I could see myself implementing into my future fat loss routines. Alright, so now that we've covered why I decided to do this, let's go ahead and talk about the journey itself through the entire process of those 4 weeks or 28 days. So initially, I did lose a lot of weight at first, just because simply my maintenance is around 3,000, 3,500. That's what I ate before this cut. And then when I went straight into it, I decided to eat 1,500 calories. So that was about half of my calories, which is a lot of calories to be cutting out, going into a 50% calorie deficit. So because of that, because of the initial huge calorie cut, I lost a lot of water weight because you're just simply eating less food. You're eating a lot less carbs, which leads to a lot of water retention. You eat a lot less salt, again, that leads to more water retention. And also, regardless of the size of your deficit, your body is going to cut down on the amount of muscle glycogen you have, because when you cut calories, you're just basically putting yourself in an energy deficit state. So your body still goes, oh, we need that energy from somewhere. So initially, it's going to pull all that energy from your muscle glycogen. So as we can see from my weight chart here, I lost about 3.5 pounds on that first day, starting at my 1,500 calorie target. And a lot of people might celebrate this because they're like, yes, I lost 3 pounds in one day, and they think it's pure fat. But no, fat loss still takes time, and I know that the majority of this was because of water weight. Now on to the next point. A lot of people will probably have questions about, so what did you follow as a part of your diet? You know, what secret fat burning foods did you eat? Because a lot of people are misled to thinking that there's some special diet or that there's some special food that they need to be eating in order to lose fat. And I'm gonna be honest, I kept it really simple. I ate a lot of protein, a lot of veggies, a lot of fruits, and generally really filling and low calorie foods. Because really, there are no secret fat burning foods that you need to be eating. You just need to be in a calorie deficit. And of course, there are better and worse choices for your calorie deficit. You know, you wanna be eating things that keep you full, keep you satiated, so you don't always think about food and you're not always hungry throughout your day while you are dieting in a deficit. And if you do want to learn more about this, you can go ahead and check out my other video, how to stay full in a calorie deficit. But all in all, there are no secrets. Just eat a lot of lean protein, a lot of leafy green vegetables, a lot of fruits, and that's pretty much it. These foods are going to help keep you full. As for training, what I did during the journey itself for training, I pretty much strength trained 3 times a week, still focused on lifting heavy because we need a signal to the body, hey, let's keep all this hard-earned muscle in our body. Let's not lose all this muscle, because muscle is very metabolically active, so it's going to help you maintain a higher metabolism. And also, by the time you finish your fat loss, you want to look lean, you want to look good, and having muscle mass is going to help a lot with this. And then as for cardio, I didn't really do any structured cardio. Like, I wasn't hammering away at the treadmill, at the Stairmaster, on the elliptical at the gym. I just basically focused on getting a good number of steps. Initially, I told myself that I would aim for 8,000 a day, but I just wanted to go above and beyond, and I aimed for at least 10,000 every day. And then, as you can see from my Excel sheets over here, I ended up calculating my weekly step average, and I actually ended up averaging about, or at least 11,000 steps over the weekly basis, and over the monthly basis too. All of them were above 11,000. So that's what I did to maintain my metabolism, because a lot of people are worried that, oh, what if I slow down my metabolism as I lose fat, as I lose weight? And truthfully, the biggest reason why your metabolism slows down when you lose weight is due to a reduction in NEAT, or non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is basically the number of calories you burn doing stuff like fidgeting around, moving your body, how upbeat and energetic you feel, you know, how much you want to get up off your couch and walk around and dance, all this kind of stuff. And for a lot of people, when they first cut calories, their NEAT goes down. And so because of that, you naturally don't want to move around as much. You might feel a little bit more lazy, a little bit more lethargic, which is totally normal. But if we want to offset that, because your body naturally wants to do that because you're in an energy deficit state, so your body's like, oh, let's conserve energy because we are starving, so we don't really know when our next meal is going to come, so we need to start conserving our energy to compensate for this. So a good way to offset this is by simply getting a constant step count. Because if you hold yourself to a standard of, I'm going to try to get at least 10,000 steps or whatever number that is realistic for you or number that you want to shoot for, this helps keep your NEAT high, and so you don't have this sudden drastic reduction of NEAT as a result of that. And also to touch a little bit more on this, like I said, the longer of a deficit you are, the more of these adaptations, the more of these like downward regulation of metabolism that you're going to see. So the longer you're in a deficit, the more likely you're going to see a reduction in NEAT. Whereas honestly, these past 4 weeks, I didn't really see an overall reduction in NEAT. Like, although there were some days, obviously, I didn't want to take steps, but for the most part, I didn't feel like I was just super tired and wanted to chill on the couch all day. I still had a good amount of energy to move around, to do stuff. Like, if you check out my YouTube videos over the past 4 weeks, like, I was still moving my hands around. I didn't feel like super lethargic and just sitting here and talking like the video like this. I was still moving around. I still felt pretty upbeat. And then as for strength training, I just focused on your basic compound lifts. I didn't want to overdo it. I didn't train all the way to failure all that often because that's going to create a lot of fatigue that your body has to recover from. And because you're not getting a lot of energy or in the form of calories in the first place, you're not going to get a lot of recovery in that aspect, so we don't want to accumulate too much fatigue on the body. But I still lifted heavy, I still lifted hard enough to signal my body, hey, let's keep this hard-earned muscle on our body. And this is something that a lot of people make the mistake of. They think high reps burns more fat, or high reps burn more calories, or I need to do lightweight high reps to tone the muscle or to get muscle definition.
I'm not going for bulk, I'm going for tone.
When in reality, you should be sticking to the same training program that helped you build muscle, or if you are new to this whole thing and you're just getting into lifting, you should still be lifting with a high amount of intensity in a moderate rep range. Because intensity is what matters most to signal to your muscles that, hey, we need to either maintain or we can even build. For a lot of people, when they start to do all of this high rep training stuff and they don't really train very hard, they don't really train with enough intensity, this is why they start to lose muscle. And then on top of that, they'll add tons of cardio onto that, and then they'll end up burning a ton of muscle because they're not strength training properly, and they're also creating an even bigger deficit through doing tons of cardio. Which, by the way, if you want to learn more about rep ranges and all that, go ahead and check out my other video here, what is the best rep range to build muscle and strength. But yeah, I kept it pretty simple. I strength trained 3 times a week. I still focused on intensity and lifting heavy. I only got an adequate amount of steps. I didn't overdo it. I didn't shoot for like 15, 20,000 or did like half an hour to an hour plus of cardio every single day. And really, that's how you focus mainly on losing fat rather than losing hard-earned muscle. Because let's be honest, when we say we want to lose weight, we want to lose mainly fat. We don't want to lose muscle. Next point is that I did take measurements and pictures weekly because I wanted another metric of progress rather than just simply focusing on the scale, which is what a lot of people do as a mistake for their fat loss or their weight loss journey. They only pay attention to the scale, and also they only weigh themselves like once a week, which isn't a good frequency in my opinion. And normally what I do with my clients is that we'll take measurements every 2 weeks and progress pictures every 4 weeks. But in my case, I wanted to do this weekly because I wanted to keep track of the weekly changes because I knew that I was in such an aggressive deficit that I wanted to monitor these changes more closely and more frequently because I know that a lot of the progress is going to come pretty fast. So that's why I wanted to keep track of it weekly rather than 2 weeks and 4 weeks. And I did want to touch a little bit on why it's important to weigh yourself daily. So a huge mistake a lot of people make is that they will just weigh themselves once a week on some sort of weigh-in day that is perpetuated by these weight loss companies. And this isn't necessarily a terrible thing. Like obviously using the scale on a weekly basis can be helpful as long as you're seeing those numbers trend down over time. However, if we can take a look at the weight trend graph that I have here, if we were to do just weekly measurements, we'll see that my weight goes down and then it spikes back up and then it comes back down. And normally, when you only do this, you only see these 4 data points over the course of these 4 weeks. And what happens to a lot of people is that we can see that between weeks 2 and 3, my weight actually went back up. And for a lot of people, as soon as they see this scale weight spike up, they think they messed up somehow. They think that, oh, I messed up, so there's no point in continuing to go. I might as well give up because I'm not making the progress that I want. When in reality, they're still making a ton of progress. And as you can see, even though it spiked back up, we can still see that my overall weight trend over time is still going down, and it regulated between those 2 weigh-in points if we were to plug in all of these data points. And besides, you shouldn't be letting the scale weight dictate your feelings on a daily basis. It is literally just a piece of plastic or a piece of glass with some numbers on it that you step on every morning. Stop tying your emotions to the damn scale.
It's the bathroom scale is lying again.
And then as soon as you only look at it as data points, the more data points which you can get by weighing yourself on a daily basis, the more data you're going to have. And so you can actually plot these trend lines for yourself and actually see your progress over time. So that's why I recommend weighing yourself on a daily basis. All right, so now that we've touched on that, let's kind of go into my first 2 weeks of the diet and then how I pretty much felt. And honestly, it felt pretty brutal because I felt like that was the hardest part. And as with any diet, the hardest part is really starting because that's the huge adjustment period. That's when you start learning about all these new things about yourself. That's when you kind of like aren't used to the program as much because I went from eating 3,000 to 3,500 calories all the way down to 1,500. So that was a huge calorie slash on my end. So my body just simply wasn't used to it. I would get these hunger pangs because I was used to eating so much food versus eating like pretty much half of the food that I was eating now. So after that first week, I did dial the calories back up a little bit just because I felt like 1,500 was way too little food. And that pretty much allowed me to smoothly sail throughout the next 3 weeks. And also, despite the small increase in calories, I was still able to make phenomenal progress, as you can see with all of the data points that I have here. And then one last thing I want to talk about in terms of the journey itself, and this is probably the most important point, is your mindset during this whole thing. Because if you're not in the right mindset, you can have the perfect plan in place, but if you can't get yourself to execute it, if you can't get yourself to be comfortable and adherent to the entire process, you're not going to see an ounce of progress. And for me personally, this was the single most important mindset point that allowed me to be successful with this. And it was thinking that I never felt like I was overly restrictive with what my diet was at the time. Like even during those times where I was eating 1,500 calories, I was really dialed in because I knew that this was something I wanted to do, and it was something that I needed to commit to for the next 4 weeks. And realizing that I always had room to be flexible. Like just because I had this prescribed number of calories in my head does not mean I couldn't deviate from this plan whenever I wanted to.
Stick to the plan.
I knew that I just had to be consistent to this plan for the most part, and that I didn't have to be on track 100% of the time, and that as soon as I screwed up, that somehow I messed up and I should give up altogether, because I knew that the next day I'm like, I had my fun, I enjoyed myself, I don't need to do this again and again and again for the next week or 2 weeks, and that I could just get back on track and nail down my consistency and just get back on with my diet, training plan, and all that. And then also on the same end, you can definitely be too flexible. So knowing that, I knew that I had room for flexibility, but also I just thrived and liked being on progress and being on point with everything. I continued to do it because I told myself that this was something I wanted to prioritize right now, and that this isn't something that's going to last forever. This is something short term and I can really dial in right now. I just have to be at least this consistent in order to see progress. And also because I knew I was being more aggressive with this deficit, I actually had more flexibility in a sense. Because I was so low under my maintenance, I actually had a lot more room to work with. I knew that I could go over some days by 500 or even 1,000 calories and still be making progress. As long as I wasn't doing this every single day, I still made progress. I still stayed on plan. Again, as long as I was consistent enough with this plan, I could still see phenomenal progress. But again, don't get me wrong, that's not to say that every single day was all sunshine and rainbows and this fat loss journey was just a trip down the park and I enjoyed every single moment of it.
It's just sunshine and rainbows.
There were still some days where I didn't want to be in a calorie deficit. I didn't want to get my steps in, but I knew that I had to stay consistent to this program, and that, again, because I'm doing it aggressively and short, it was only the next 4 weeks. I just really need to dial in, and then after that, I don't have to go completely off plan, but I just need to dial back a little bit. And again, for a lot of people, including myself, the hardest part really was just getting started and getting through that adjustment period. Truthfully, once I got in the groove after the first week, after the first 2 weeks, the last 2 weeks, that last week and a half, I actually felt really comfortable in that deficit. And it actually felt like, everything was going smoothly, everything was going well, and I didn't really want to get out of my deficit crazily enough, but I knew that it was healthier for me to get out of the deficit and back into maintenance. Now, you might be looking at these measurements and be like, it looks like you lost muscle, Austin, because you lost inches off your biceps, off your glutes, off your chest, off your quads, and all that. And truthfully, while I was going through this process, I thought maybe, yeah, I am losing some muscle. And yeah, this did kind of give me a little bit of body dysmorphia, but I thought overall, if I lost 2 inches off my waist, that means I was actually losing fat around my midsection, but everything else was literally less than an inch. So even on the off chance that I did lose a tiny bit of muscle, and again, these are less than 1 inch of measurements, so I probably lost just a tiny bit of muscle. And when we really put things into perspective, the majority of the weight that I lost was fat, and even the tiny amount of muscle that I lost, again, muscle memory is a real thing. So when I get back into maintenance, when I get back into my slight surplus, I can start rebuilding all of this muscle back again. And the cool thing about muscle memory is that it's going to take much less time and effort to rebuild the strength and muscle than it did for me to initially build that strength and muscle. And again, that is an off chance that I probably did lose muscle, but that also could have been overall water retention, overall bloatedness, muscle glycogen, and all that, because your muscles can look less or more full depending on how many calories you're eating, how many carbs you're eating, how much water you're getting, and all that. So it's really hard to tell if I lost actual muscle fiber mass, like the muscle proteins that contract and everything, or if it's just all of the water, all of the fluids, all of the other random stuff that are filled in between your muscle fibers, but they are still within the muscles. It's more so the stuff that we can't really exactly see or measure. Not that I would want to go into a lab and measure all that anyway, just because it seems like a hassle, but for the most part, I don't think I lost all that, or if any, muscle at all. And worst case scenario, even if it was all muscle fiber, again, like I said, muscle memory is a real thing. I can rebuild all of that pretty quickly.
And it's a sleep chin-ups on muscle memory alone.
It's hard to tell and measure that kind of stuff, but when we really talk about fat loss, I came out looking leaner, my measurements went down, my weight was down, there's no question about it that I lost fat. So even if trimming down all that fat cost me maybe half a pound of muscle, I don't really care. There always will be time to rebuild and to continue building. And I think that was a pretty good summary for the journey itself. I don't really have anything else off the top of my head. But as for the progress results, let's kind of get into that. So I ended up losing 11 pounds from start to finish. I started off at 176.4, and then I ended at 165.4. Yeah, crazily enough, it's exactly 11 pounds on the dot. And then if you take a look at my measurements, I ended up losing 2 inches off my waist, 3¼ inches off my quads, ½ inch off my glutes, ½ inch from my chest and lats, ½ inch from my biceps, and then no inches lost from my calves. All right, so after we've talked about progress and results, let's kind of get into any aha moments I've had, any sort of epiphanies I've had throughout this process.
Hence, my epiphany.
So one thing I really did like about this approach is that for the most part, if we look at my data tracking, so one thing I really did like about this is that I could kind of have a on switch and off switch. I really dialed myself into the weekdays, and that of course associated with me getting more work done, really zoning in on making content and all that, and that correlated well with my diet, which means I was all in and just really zoning in, whereas the weekends I could kind of chill a little bit more, knowing that I still made progress. Obviously I didn't go super overboard and ate 10,000 calories or did a 10,000 calorie challenge, but I was still dialed in. I had more flexibility on the weekends to enjoy myself a little bit, but overall, and the most important thing, overall, I was still making progress knowing that. And this is the point I want to drive home the most. Overall, as long as you're in a weekly or a monthly deficit, that is what's going to matter. Because a lot of people get so caught up in thinking that, oh, if I'm out of a calorie deficit for today or tomorrow or just one day, I've ruined all my progress. When in reality, if you go over like by 300 calories on one day, but the next day you get right back on track, you stick to your normal calories, you can still end up in a weekly deficit. And again, like I said, fat loss takes time. Even though I lost 3.5 pounds on that first day, I knew a lot of it wasn't fat. Fat loss itself is still going to take time because you need to be consistently in that calorie deficit over time. And then once you get into that calorie deficit, once you get into that constant fat burning state, then your body starts to consistently pull out fat stores and use that as energy. Because a lot of people don't realize fat loss is not a daily thing. Because something a lot of people don't realize is that your body is actually constantly burning fat. Like your body doesn't just magically switch into like a fat loss or fat burning state. Contrary to what a lot of keto zealots might say, your body on a daily basis is constantly going through fat burning and fat storage all the time. And really what happens when you are in a fat loss or a fat storage state is that most of the time, so let's say, 5 out of 7 days, or let's say 16 hours out of the 24 hours of a day, you are eating less calories than your body burns. This is when you are in that fat loss state, because when you spend more of the time in a calorie deficit, then your body's slowly chipping away at that fat. Whereas if you're spending a lot of your time in that calorie surplus, even though you just dieted for one day, if you spend the rest of the week eating 3,000, 4,000 plus calories, that's when your body's like, oh, well, we're getting more energy over the long term, so we're going to store more fat. This is why either way, when you stay on track and be perfect with your diet for one day, or when you go completely off track for one day, this doesn't mean it's the end of the world and you're going to suddenly change your results 180. It's where you spend most of the time. It's what you do consistently that matters in terms of your progress and results. It's when you spend 5 out of the 7 days, 6 out of the 7 days in a deficit, then your body is in a fat burning state for this day, and it's for this day, and it's for this day, maybe it goes up this day, but overall, because you are overall, and I'm saying this word so many times because I want you to get this through your head, overall, when you're in a fat burning state more of the time, because of a calorie deficit, you are going to see fat loss. And this is another topic for another video, but fat burning and fat loss are not the same thing. Losing body fat, the process of fat loss, is going to come through a calorie deficit. And just because you are burning dietary fat, like a lot of keto experts want to perpetuate, that doesn't mean you're inherently going to be losing fat, because dietary fat and actual body fat are not the same thing. Because burning dietary fat from your diet versus burning actual body fat from your body isn't the same process. All right, so now that we've covered all that in terms of the aha moments I've had, what am I doing to actually maintain these results? Because it's good and all that you get these results, but what's even more important is how you maintain these results over the long term. And no, I'm not completely switching my diet around. I'm literally following the same exact diet, but I'm eating a little bit more food. And this is the most important thing, because if the method or process is sustainable, then the results are going to be sustainable. You see, people that fail the most are people who think that I'm just going to be in this fat loss mindset, or I'm going to be in this fat loss process for a short period of time. And then after I'm done with that, I'm going to completely change things up. I can follow a completely different diet. I can follow a completely different training program. And then suddenly I'll be able to magically maintain those results. Whereas instead, from the get-go, if you just focused on the process it takes to maintain those results, you are going to end up with the process on how to maintain those results afterward. And while yes, some people might be, oh, but your maintenance is like 3,000 calories, so that means you can just magically eat so much junk. And technically, these people aren't necessarily completely wrong, but just because I have more flexibility doesn't mean I'm just gonna go eat a bunch of junk food, because number one, it just doesn't make me feel good. Like, I still have to worry about workout performance, I still have to worry about overall health, so I'm still eating generally healthy foods. Also, secondly, just because you have a higher calorie intake does not magically mean it's all sunshine and rainbows. Really, this diet and calorie intake thing is all relative. For someone whose maintenance might be 1,500 calories, them eating 750 calories in a deficit is the equivalent of me with a 3,000 maintenance and eating 1,500. So just because both of us eat different amounts of food does not necessarily mean we both feel different. Like in terms of relativity, we are both feeling the same in terms of hunger levels, in terms of satiety, just eating that many few calories. We still have to work on these same concepts of eating filling and satiating foods. Basically, how you maintain your results should look really similar to how you actually got those results. So if the process for how you're getting the results looks completely different as to how you plan to maintain the results, you should probably look into that. All right, so now that we've covered all of that, let's get into the final takeaways so that you can easily digest all of this info and have some final points that you can take away and immediately apply to your own fat loss journey and see if this is the right fit for you. So first and foremost, I do want to say that there is no right or wrong way to do this. For some, the fast, more aggressive approach is going to work better. For some, the slower, more steady approach is going to work better. It really just depends on your experience level, your mindset around this whole thing, your lifestyle, and all of the individual factors of your life pretty much that play into this. But I would say some questions to ask yourself to help you determine if this is a right fit for you. It really depends on where you are at life. Like, are you someone who is able to really zone in and do these short, aggressive fat loss sprints? Or are you someone who needs a little bit more flexibility because of your lifestyle? Maybe you have a family to tend to and you indulge in that. You guys go out as a family and always have all of these higher calorie meals. So it just doesn't make sense to really dial in and tell yourself, I'm going to eat like 1,000 something calories and like, screw my family, like screw their outings. I'm just going to like be in a hermit by myself at home and just really zone in on my diet. Another huge factor that plays into this is your experience level with dieting, training, and fitness in general. Because I've had a few people message me and say, oh, your starting point is my end goal point. And while yes, this might look like it's true, it's really not, because this isn't my first time dieting. This isn't my first starting point ever. This is probably my at least like 10th dieting cycle. So it's basically my 10th starting point. Like my first dieting point, my first dieting journey did not look anything like this. It took a lot of trial and error. It took a lot of practice before I really found the approach that I knew was going to work for me this time. And even then, this new approach was still new for me. Even though I knew what to do for the most part, I didn't know what to expect in terms of what I was going to get out of this fat loss journey. So just like you, I am constantly learning and trying to teach myself and trying to experiment with new things. So for the most part, I would say if you're someone who is just starting out, you might need to learn the slow and steady approach to teach yourself these new habits, to form this healthier mindset around food, around dieting, and basically around just staying consistent to a routine before you try this aggressive approach. Because I will say for the majority of people, it does take a little bit of an extra like dedication and mindset to embark on this thing. But if you're someone who doesn't have too many other commitments in life and you feel like this is going to work well for me, I can really zone in for 4 to 6 weeks at a time and then I can take these breaks, then this might be something you can consider for yourself. But if you're someone who has too much on their plate and you can't see yourself being really dialed in for the next like 4 to 6 weeks, these are typically the time periods that I recommend for doing these aggressive sprints. But yeah, if you're just someone who has too much commitments on their plate, you might benefit just from taking the slow and more steady approach. Like even though you might not see as fast of results, you can still be aware of your nutrition and your training decisions, build consistency from there, start slow, and still see results even though it feels like your life is hectic and you have so much other stuff going on. But as I've said, the main takeaway point that I do want to drive home is that no matter what you do, no matter if you do these short sprints or if you take the slower walk or jog in your fat loss journey, in the long term, it is still going to take the same amount of time. And what I mean by this is that let's say you have 40 pounds to lose. No matter what you do, no matter if you do these short fat loss sprints, no matter if you do the slowly chipping away, the slow and steady approach of losing these 40 pounds, at the end of however long it takes you to lose those 40 pounds, let's say it just takes you a year and a half to do it. It's still going to take that year and a half no matter what you do or what your approach looks like. And you're probably thinking, wait, that doesn't make any sense. It means that no matter if you take the short, more aggressive approach, you're still going to have to factor in diet breaks. No one is going to be able to survive on super low and super aggressive deficits for a long period of time. So let's say you do take the shorter aggressive approach, you do 6 weeks on aggressive diet, you lose a good amount of weight during that time, you're still going to have to take that diet break for your own mental and physical health, to spend a little bit more time at maintenance before you dive right back into that deficit. And then you're going to have to go through these cycles of aggressive dieting and then maintenance, and aggressive dieting and maintenance. Whereas if you took the more slow and steady approach, maybe you didn't go super hard at first, but you found some sort of moderate calorie intake to go with, and then you slowly chip away at that, and then you still have to take diet breaks no matter how slow or fast your deficit is. Maybe you can diet for longer. Maybe you diet for 3 months, and then after that you take a diet break, and then you diet again for 3 months. Overall, it's going to take a similar amount of time to reach your goal. Again, it's just a matter of your lifestyle and your mindset around this whole thing. Even though it's going to take a year and a half in the long term in this example, maybe you're someone who's like, yes, I can go hard for the next 4 to 6 weeks, and then I'll take a break for 2 to 3 weeks, and then I'll go hard again. Or maybe you're someone who's like, I have a lot going on, I'm just going to slowly work at this for the next 3 months, take a diet break, slowly work at this for 3 months. Different strokes for different folks. Different methods will work with different people in different ways. It just, again, it all depends on your lifestyle and your commitments and your mindset around this whole thing and what you want to do. Think about it as you trying to get from point A to point B. It is going to be the same distance regardless. It's just a matter of, are you someone who prefers to sprint short periods, walk for a short amount of time to recover, sprint again, and walk there until you eventually make it to point B? Or are you someone who's like, I'm going to jog slowly from A to B and work my way there slowly? And ultimately, I can't answer that question for you. It's something that you're going to have to ask yourself. It's something that you're probably going to have to experiment and try and figure it out yourself. But I really hope that this video helped. This was a chock full of information. I don't even know how long this video is going to be, but I have like an hour of footage right now. So yeah, thank you so much for listening. I really hope this has helped. And again, please reach out if you do have any questions or need any help with anything. I have my email and all my other platforms in the description below. Don't forget to like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe for more, and I will catch you in the next one.